Secrets from the past. The mystery of Grandma's chest that changed our lives. The family story began in my grandmother's old house, where every corner seemed full of secrets. The house stood on the edge of the village, right by the forest, and for decades it had been the heart of our family. Every summer, we would come here to spend a few days together, reliving memories and soaking in the warmth that was hard to find in the city. This time, everything felt different. My grandmother seemed restless. She moved from room to room, as though searching for something, but she never said what it was. Her eyes, usually filled with warmth, were now clouded with unease. I watched her but didn't dare to ask. In our family, it was understood. If someone wanted to share something, they would do so in their own time. One evening, after everyone had gone to their rooms, I stayed with her by the fireplace. She sat in her old rocking chair, hands resting on her lap, staring into the fire. "Anna, do you remember the old chest in the basement?" she asked suddenly. I nodded. The chest had been there for as long as I could remember. Once when I was 10, I tried to open it, but the lock was too strong. After that, I never thought about it again. "It's time for you to know what's inside," she said, rising from her chair. "I've kept this hidden for many years, but you deserve to know." We went down to the basement. It smelled of old wooden boards and dust. Grandma pulled a key from her pocket and slowly unlocked the chest. The creak of the hinges was like a whisper of secrets waiting to be told. Inside, I found old letters, yellowed photographs, and a crescent-shaped pendant. Grandma picked up the pendant and held it tightly in her hand. "This is all that remains of my past," she said, a tear rolling down her cheek. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "Before your grandfather, I had another life, another love. His name was Alexei. We were young, happy, but the war destroyed everything. He went to the front and promised to return, but he never did." Grandma wiped away her tears and went on. "Years later, after I married your grandfather, I learned that Alexei had survived, but he didn't dare come back to me, thinking I had forgotten him. It was strange to hear. I had always thought of Grandma and Grandpa as the perfect couple, but now I understood her heart had been divided between two men. The next day, I began going through the photographs and letters. One of the letters was addressed to Grandma but signed with a mysterious name, V. The letter mentioned a meeting at an old manor outside the village, but Grandma had never spoken of such a place. It seemed like this part of her past had been hidden from everyone. I decided to find out who V was. My search led me to the local archive, where I discovered that the manor mentioned in the letter had belonged to the Vishnevsky family. They had been wealthy, but after the war their history was lost. In the documents, I found a note about a man who returned to the manor after the war, but disappeared under mysterious circumstances. I decided to visit the manor. It stood half-ruined, hidden behind dense trees. Inside there was silence, but it felt like the house held more than just emptiness. On one wall I found an old painting of a man wearing a pendant, exactly like the one I had found in the chest. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw an old man. His eyes were piercing, yet kind. "Are you looking for answers?" he asked. I told him about my grandmother, the letters, and the pendant. The man smiled. "Your grandmother should have told you this story a long time ago," he said. "She's carried a heavy burden because of that pendant. It was a symbol of a promise made to her by Alexei." The old man turned out to be a friend of Alexei's. He explained that after the war, Alexei had searched for my grandmother for years, but when he finally found her, he learned she was married. Not wanting to disrupt her happiness, he decided to leave the pendant as a symbol of their love. I returned home with this story and shared everything with my grandmother. She listened silently, then said, "Now I understand why he left the pendant. It was his way of saying goodbye, but I never stopped loving him." That evening I realized that every family has its secrets, but they don't always need to remain hidden. Sometimes the truth can become a source of understanding and acceptance, as it did for our family.